friends, David Melander. I want to talk about really what's the core of the culture of heaven, and I'm going to call that Father's movement. I'm going to describe it as in a movement and how Father is embracing people around the world in these days. I think we talked in one of the earlier videos of what Jesus said would happen in the last days: famine, earthquake, war, genocide, epidemics. I know that it's always been famines, for example. But when I studied this, I wanted to see if there was a quantitative difference. What I found was, at the time Jesus spoke it, there was about 200 million people alive on the earth. And the time when they established Jerusalem, or reestablished the nation of Israel, there was around 200 million people starving. Today there's about 800 million people. So it was a quantitative, like crossing a threshold. So, these things that Jesus spoke about are definitely happening, but we're not supposed to be afraid, because Father is sending us great comfort. So we want to talk about Jesus and the close of the age. When Jesus talked about those things like earthquakes and wars and stuff like that, he also said, but that's not the end, because he said this gospel of the kingdom will go throughout the whole earth. So you think about, again, my father's lifetime. He lived to 99 and just died not too long ago. But during his lifetime, several 100 million people have become Christians and discovered that personal living connection. I mean, in China alone, there's probably around 150 million believers right now. How could that happen in just a generation or two? This is a time of unprecedented revival. He also said that this days would be a time of difficulty and of glory. So we'll talk about this later, but I just want to say that glory is the native state of the church. And what we mean is where the Lord himself is present in a tangible, beautiful way. And this becomes a beacon of light in the darkest places, in the darkest times. And miracles, yes, but primarily presence, fellowship, glory. So I want to talk about kind of a progressive revelation through essentially Western history. So in the 1730s, there was the beginning of what we would call the evangelical movement. And this was essentially a revelation that came upon the church, that people could have a personal, living relationship with Jesus Christ. And then starting early 1900s, and then really culminating in the 1960s, we would call the Pentecostal and Charismatic movement. And this was a simple idea, which is you can have a living, personal relationship with Holy Spirit. Now in this day, Father is being revealed by Jesus into the church in a deliberate way, because Father wants to give us the kind of strength that will keep us in the days ahead and keep our hearts from growing cold. So I want to say this is both a healing movement and a revival. And it's a healing movement in the sense that as Father begins to show himself to us, in contrast to our experience, we become healed, become a wholehearted, joyful self. I could give you an example. A friend of mine had experienced a very, very sad form of trauma. And the memories of that were just pressing in on him, consciously or unconsciously, all the time. And at one point, where we were praying together, Jesus took him to that memory, and he didn't want to go to that memory really because it was very sad for him and it's full of pain. But Jesus went with him. Jesus went with him into the memory where he could tangibly feel the presence of Jesus. And Jesus showed him how he had wanted to protect him. and wanted to prevent that from happening. So that memory, that traumatic, terrible memory, changed from being one of just kind of terror to being a memory of Jesus wanting to protect him. So this healing, this movement is both a healing movement and a revival. Love is being restored to the church because we're becoming family. We're learning to become family. What that means is people in this family are able to be with each other in very difficult places and walk through them with their very difficult memories and see the Lord bring healing. And I'm not exaggerating that I could share with you hundreds of experiences, one by one, of praying with people where the Lord helped them recover from the trauma and just regain a joyful personal identity. Let me just share one really briefly. A friend of mine, her name's, let's use Carol. When she was a young girl, her eye was poked out by her sister. Her sister had a toy, and her sister was just going to surprise with the toy, but instead, it poked her eye, and she lost her eye, and then she had a glass eye. So then when she was in school, people made fun of her. It was a terrible thing. It was very sad, and it was very hard. And she was like very shy, kind of reticent, because the world for her was a place where things come out of nowhere and irreparably harm her. So when we were praying together and she felt safe in the presence of Jesus, we asked if she felt safe if Jesus went with her into that memory. And she went into that memory, and it was just like it was fresh, like she was reliving that moment. And she heard Jesus tell her, "Oh, darling, I want to protect you. I want to protect you. Your little sister's going to do something very stupid. Oh, I wish I could warn you." And when she heard what was going on inside of the heart of God, that memory changed. So that memory became not a memory of just trauma, but also a memory of the heart of Jesus towards her. And what happened was she started to really change. Instead of the world being someplace that comes out of nowhere and irreparably harms you, the world became a place where Jesus is constantly reaching to speak to her and to protect her. So this is a healing movement. Worldwide, this is a fatherless generation. Nothing like this has ever occurred in world history. I don't know if we have data on that, but certainly by observation. Very often when I have a chance to speak or to go somewhere and talk about the Father Heart of God, I find sometimes whole societies, whole sections of society are experiencing a degree of fatherlessness that was never in the previous generations. So there's doors of supernatural love and revelation that Jesus is opening, and he wants to reveal his Father into the church. So we have a new heart, a new resource, a new strength, a new definition, mostly a new definition of ourselves, where we are able to adopt a joyful, personal identity that gives us great strength. So I believe there's another wave of manifestation of revival coming, but this will be different. This will be deeper. Instead of just like something supernatural happening, we're going to see the thumbprint of God and a revelation of the beauty of his heart in the miracles that are coming. Now I want to talk about the characteristics of this movement. Okay, I'm just going to say how I think it looks like. So the first is, I think we're going to see an abandonment of materialism, of people living for this present age, and it replaced by a new spirit of generosity. I believe this is one of Father's serious outcomes for this movement. Second is, people touched by this will be confident and they'll be able to walk in dark places. I think of, for example, a friend of mine who was at a restaurant late at night. It's a place that serves a lot of people who are active Satan worshipers. And one of these people was so angry with my friend. He was just furious. He just said, That's fight. And this man, it turns out, was like bare knuckle fighting champion. Very tough guy. And so my friend agreed to go out on the street. But when he stood on the street next to the man, he said to him, I just think you're in just complete bondage. And I just want to help you. I think the violence in you it's just held you captive. I want you to be free. And the man literally fell on his knees and said, I want to be free. So my friend then prayed over him and led him to Jesus. So my friend was not afraid of going into dark places because he feels Father with him. He feels that sense of sonship. And that sense of sonship is secure enough that even to somebody who's maybe violent or some other kind of frightening, like part of a satanic cult or whatever, normally Christians like run scared of people like that. But when the spirit of sonship comes on us, we don't feel afraid anymore because we feel we're being embraced in such a deep, secure way. When that we ourselves are healed, we have comfort with which we can comfort other people. And we have the strength inside ourselves to be able to go with people with their pain. I remember sometimes when we've prayed with people and they've experienced like really deep, deep trauma. Sometimes it's just, it blows your mind that people can be so evil to each other or to their own children. And yet, that revelation of sonship in me has allowed me to be confident to go with people into their trauma and help them find Father in that same way. So I think the fourth thing is that there's going to be a love for the seed of Abraham, but not only that, for Muslims, for people of all different races and cultures. I believe there's a time coming when there's going to be an extraordinary revival among Muslim people groups. And the church, it's time for us to begin turning our heart, instead of feeling afraid of Muslim people because of all this jihad stuff, where we begin to have our human prejudice just plowed under, and we begin to share the heart of Jesus for all people. Okay, the last thing is that there will be a new joy in the church, because joyful personal identity gives us a strength to feel good about ourselves that exhibits in joy. What are the outcomes? Well, the first is that Father wants to make his home in us. It's not just like an idea, but where there's a sense of availability of the presence of God, that you can reach out and connect with him. This process of self-revelation to the church begins. He intends to wipe away every tear from our eyes. Of course, it culminates when Jesus comes back, but he's beginning now. And then another outcome is he carries us through hard times. He's going to lend his strength. I think of, like, for example, if you've ever been in New York and gone to Grand Central Station, at certain times of the day, it is like massive, ultimate madhouse. And if you went there as a child, you'd be lost. It would be terrible. But if you hold on to somebody's hand, you're okay. So I think that's what this means. When Jesus said in the last days, many people's hearts would grow cold. And I think that that's actually happening right now. But this connection with an intimate connection with Father is meant to keep our heart from growing cold. This revelation is meant to be a revelation and a saturating baptism. What I'm talking about is not accepting a concept about God. That is, we're not saying, you need to add more theology to your theology book. You need to understand more. You need to be able to recite more. It's not that. It's meant to be a heart-to-heart revelation. I remember I was driving somewhere a few weeks ago. I was very anxious. And Father spoke to me He said, son, you're thinking like an orphan, but you're not an orphan. Look, I'm right here with you. And my anxiety just melted. This is meant to be not a concept that we share, but a heart-to-heart revelation. Okay, we can preach this, but until it becomes revealed into us, it can't be manifest. Jesus wants, it's his earnest intention to speak this into us. And we start by humbling ourselves as little children. I want to close by saying, I believe fully with my whole heart, based on my own experience and many, many people that I know, that Jesus didn't die just so you could go to heaven. In fact, he said, no man comes to the Father except by me. You know, I think sometimes when we hear that in our mind, we think nobody goes to heaven except by Jesus. But that wasn't the purpose of the cross and of his blood. It was to buy fellowship between you and Father. So Jesus is really into this. It was core to his mission itself. And since Jesus paid his blood for this, it's up to us to help him receive the full reward of his suffering by coming into this. So I just want to say, the Father himself loves you. Humble yourself as a little child. Make yourself vulnerable to his presence. Let him love you even in layers of you that are dry, or even layers of you that are closed. It'll ask those parts of you to slowly come to the front and let them be present in the presence of Father. I remember for me, not too long ago, I was very upset, disappointed by a bunch of stuff, and I was struggling with it. And it made me feel like, why is God doing this to me? Okay, I'm just total transparency, because that wasn't true. But even with that feeling, I said, Father, I'm going to let your presence be fully here with me. Even this part of my heart that kind of blames you, that feels deeply disappointed, you can be fully present with this part also. I want you to be fully present with me because I know this is the only place where I can be baptized in genuine love and brought to the beauty of the joyful personal identity you dreamt when you gave me this heart to live. So I'm just going to encourage everyone listening to let yourself go there and just be baptized in that love.